Welcome in, everyone, here to the Voice of College Football and our weekly get-together with Steve Deace from Michigan podcast that we like to term The One, because it's one big major college football topic that Steve and I will size up and go back and forth on, whether we agree or disagree. It's purely authentic, so it's not point and counterpoint necessarily. It's Steve's opinion on this topic, and it's mine as well. Well, of course, Steve, we appreciate you being here as always, and want to invite everyone on over to Michigan Podcast, where Steve does an exceptional job. And he's got one particular guest in particular that you want to catch each and every week as well. But no, Kevin Warren, of course, Big Ten commissioner, has stepped down after about 3.5 years on the job. And I'll give you basically what I believe are three prongs of his resume and tenure that are going to be the lasting impact. I'll give you one big negative and let you take it from there. So for me, obviously, it was the handling of the pandemic. So first and foremost, he rushed to judgment. He made a decision. He canceled the season when he did not have to yet. When you're dealing with that kind of situation, you can obviously get together with your brain trust and determine at what point do we have to make a decision? What date is drop dead date? Well, way before that point, sometime in early to mid-August, he's canceling the season without really fully vetting out the science, the opportunities that are available, the resources, the facilities, everything that's available to him to make a go of it. It was almost the exact opposite of what Greg Sankey did with the SEC, where they were hell-bent on playing football and said, hey, let's figure out how we can safely play football. With Kevin Warren, it was the exact opposite. And he completely was out of touch with the fan base, the coaches, the players, and even some of the administrators at that point. So he jumped to a decision. It was a rash decision. He recently said in reviewing his tenure with the Big Ten that he had no regrets on how he handled the pandemic. And then he said, well, we did have some miscommunications. Well, then you had some regrets on how you handled the pandemic. So that was blown on a number of counts. And in particular, I've got a question, even though I've got no concrete evidence of this necessarily, his motivation. I hope that it was the safety of the players, in a sense, considering that his son was playing football at Mississippi State in a basically uninterrupted season. I don't know that that's a good look when you tout that your motivation is player safety. I got to think that maybe there was part of it that was more about being on the right side of the politics. So my one down note for Kevin Warren's tenure as Big Ten commissioner would be his handling of the pandemic.
You got to split Kevin Warren's tenure into halves. I mean, the first half was an unmitigated disaster. And as someone that was I guess we'll say, somewhat involved in the conversations that were taking place around COVID and college football, with some sources and contacts and stuff I can just tell you that I have it on pretty good account that essentially Warren was doing the bidding of Big Ten university presidents. And the assumption was that when the Big Ten said it wouldn't play, that the rest of the leagues would follow suit, or the SEC would just go it alone, and they could take the political hit for that because they would just blame it on, those crazy rednecks down south who, football's a religion too. What really was the tempest in the teapot for the Big Ten, or the camel's nose under the tent, was when the ACC decided that it was going to play. It kind of views the ACC as a school that takes, or a conference that has schools that take academics seriously, like Virginia, North Carolina, Duke. These are high-ranking academic institutions. University of Pittsburgh is as well. And when the ACC was like, it's cool that y'all don't want to play, we get Notre Dame in our conference, so we're going to figure this thing out. All right, that I think is what really stung the Big Ten and hung them out to dry. I don't think he had any clout at all. I think he was really just doing the business, or doing the bidding of political animals known as university presidents, and a couple of them in particular, like former University of Michigan president Mark Schlissel. That's what I think. I think the second half, you look at the deals to bring in USC and UCLA. You look at the unprecedented TV deal, I mean, I'd give him an F for the first year and a half, Mark. I'd give him an A for the last year and a half. And so somewhere in there in the middle is a C. But the one thing I would say, though, even about the part where he did well, is I think there's a lot of competent people that could have been hired for this gig that could have negotiated a lucrative deal, television network deal. Maybe if you want to say that because of his NFL ties, he had the foresight to create a game in every time window like the NFL has, right? With different national networks all working together. And so you want to give him credit for that. I'm fine with that. I also think there's a lot of competent people the Big Ten could have hired for the gig that could have lured a USC that was not happy with the lack of investment in the Pac-12 and a UCLA that's tens of millions of dollars in debt. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think he gets maybe too much blame because of the COVID thing. And that's what he's paid to do, right? He's paid to be the front of the university presidents, but I think they were really the ones pulling the strings behind the curtain there. And I think maybe he gets a little too much credit for the additions of USC and UCLA and the television network, because the Big Ten just had so much clout from where it stood from his predecessor that I think there's a lot of people we could have hired here that would have done or could have accomplished those things. But so I'm fine averaging out and giving him a C. That's what I would do.
Yeah, certainly in that situation, just like head coach, just like quarterback, too much blame, too much credit. Obviously, he had to have a number of people, smart people involved in the television deal and in, getting the expansion of USC and UCLA. So I'll point to the USC UCLA coup first and foremost because of the relationship that the Big Ten has had with the Pac-12 for decades and decades, and certainly under the tenure of Jim Delaney. It's hard for me to imagine a Jim Delaney-led Big Ten going after USC and UCLA. Maybe I'm wrong. We will never know. But certainly Kevin Warren looked at his closest ally in the sport, and he took their two biggest brands. And what happened there was, of course, you now make the Big Ten truly a national brand more so than any other conference by stretching from coast to coast. You go into California, you go into the most populous state, you go into the second largest TV market, you grab the two biggest shiny brands out there. You basically just counter what the SEC did with Oklahoma and Texas in the very best possible way. Mm-hmm. So, and the recruiting in the one challenge that the Big Ten does have in my eyes is, of course, recruiting going forward. That just gets worse and worse in regards to the amount of players in the footprint, but you open up another pathway, another channel to one of the three best high school football producing states in America. So USC, UCLA is a near A+ on my tote board.
Yeah, I don't know in terms of it's clearly an A+ move for the Big Ten. I think there's broader implications of what it may mean for collegiate sports and whether that's healthy. But I think that it's unknowable what Jim Delaney would do. I don't think Jim Delaney would just stand pat. I mean, you're talking about the guy that created the Big Ten network because he was dared by your former executives at your former job at ESPN. They gave him what he thought was a lowball offer. He said, that's not going to cut it. And they looked at him and said, what are you going to do? Go form your own network? He said, you know what? I might do that. And they said, literally, this is how the conversation went. They said, well, that's a roll of the dice. He goes, consider them rolled. That's how we got the Big Ten network. Literally, that's what happened. So do I think looking at the SEC getting in Oklahoma and Texas, looking at the grant of rights deal that the ACC did to protect itself, because I think that would have been Jim Delaney's first desire would be to bring his alma mater, North Carolina, into the league, to bring the University of Virginia into the league and expand closer to the Sun Belt. But with that off the table, I can't sit here and say for certain that he would not have gone to USC and UCLA. That to me is an unknowable. I don't think he would have stood pat. I don't, but that's an unknowable. And you have to say this about Kevin Warren. In the end, the Big Ten is worth more the day that he's leaving than it was the day that he arrived. And if you're, for most conference commissioners, that's pretty much the final standard to determine your level of success or not.
What I like about the deal that Kevin Warren struck, the multimedia deal, and to your point, if you're running the Big Ten and you have half a brain and surround yourself with decent people that know what they're doing, and you put the numbers down on paper, you're going to convert the TV ratings and the brands into billions of dollars. But it, in a sense, was a breakthrough deal in that it was a multi-layered deal with multiple networks. It wasn't the Big Ten just cutting its deal with ESPN and understanding what it has there, and then it goes to Fox and it cuts that deal, and they're basically separate deals. It was in concert together, the entire NBC, CBS, and Fox deals. And to be able to bring that NFL model of TV scheduling to college football and cover all the time zones, cover all the networks, and know that even if we've got our NBC game isn't going to hit until prime time, that they're going to be promoting that throughout the day. So on 3 networks, every Saturday, there's going to be promotion of Big Ten games, even when we're not playing on that network. I think I don't want to call it a stroke of brilliance. That would be a far reach, but it was a good deal.
Very good deal. I don't know that I would call it brilliant, but I would give him credit for observation. I'm fine if you want to say his NFL background gave him the foresight to come up with this notion. And the reality is there's only 2 properties in college sports, 3, throw Notre Dame in there as a singular entity. There's only 3 properties in college sports that could have done this deal, even if they envisioned it. Like maybe the head of the Sun Belt envisioned something like this. They don't have the clout to pull it off, so there's no point in proposing it. There's only 3 people that could make this happen: the athletic director at Notre Dame, the commissioner of the SEC, and the commissioner of the Big Ten. And so you give him credit, I guess, for being one of only 3 people in the country that could have pulled a deal like that off, both with the clout and the foresight, having them both at the same time. And he did it. So that's his crowning achievement, in my view.
Folks, this is our get-together with Steve Deace of Michigan Podcast each and every week. We will do our best to make that every Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern time, but there are schedules that get in the way, so that's why you subscribe, hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live, and check out Steve's work on Michigan Podcast, of course. This is our take on college football each and every week. One topic, thus the one. All right, Steve, if they come calling and knocking at your door, meaning the Big Ten, and make you conference commissioner, don't know if you would take the job, but if you did, what would be your priorities going forward?
Incentivizing competitive excellence. Getting rid of divisions, which will occur. Coming up with a scheduling system that I wouldn't even worry about equitable. I mean, I would come up with a scheduling system that emphasizes we're not the NFL. In terms of parity, the reality is programs like Indiana aren't worth what Michigan and Ohio State are. They're subsidies. So I don't want to be the Pac-12 where I've got USC playing road games on short weeks on Friday nights. No, we're not doing that. We're going to emphasize our elite brands. We're going to make them play each other. That's good for television networks and television revenue. But along those lines, we're not going to kill them from a schedule standpoint either. I understand if the networks basically want USC, UCLA, Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State to essentially play each other every single year in some combination. I get that. But then I'm not going to load up the rest of the schedule and let the other teams essentially get by either. I'm going to compensate for that in some way, shape, or form. I'm going to try to come up with creative NIL deals. Maybe I come up with a conference-wide NIL deal where part of the television revenue is the players get a percentage of the money. And since it's coming from a third-party entity, a television network, not from a conference or from directly from a conference or directly from the school, you don't have any Title IX concerns. Or more broadly, maybe I just let those percentages play out across the sport, So let's just say 2% of what we bring in for television revenue goes into an NIL collective for players. So it's 2% of whatever your sport draws. And obviously football would draw more, but there would be certainly some revenue for women's basketball there. There'd be some television revenue, right? So maybe that's what I would do. But I would want to come up with ways to make sure we don't get left behind in the future procurement of talent because you're right. That's the biggest challenge right now is our universities have alumni bases and endowments up here that blow the SEC out of the water. Just, I mean, for all the Bubba love sponges that own their car dealerships in the South that are given $5,000 handshakes and are big man on campuses, they don't hold the jock straps to the endowment and alumni bases we have at places like Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. So I would unleash those. And that's how I would compensate for the demographic disadvantage we have to the Sun Belt is, we're going to have our stuff together when it comes to NIL, and it's going to be very lucrative. And we're going to unleash money cannons that's going to make SEC boosters look like, they're pimps for street hookers. This is a high price call girl ring, my friend. All right. We're not doing $5 you holla. That's what they do down south. Up here, this is a real legit gig. All right. Real legit. And that's what I do. I would, my emphasis would be on competitive excellence, not balance, excellence.
I guess the way I was thinking of this, and I'm right on board with you in regards to all of that, was thinking more from a perception leadership standpoint, not necessarily just protecting the interests of the Big Ten, which that is the Big Ten commissioner's role. That's why he's hired. That's what he's obligated to perform, is not what is best in the best interest of college football or college athletics, but what is in the best interest of the Big Ten. Therefore, that's why I don't fault Greg Sankey in particular for taking Oklahoma and Texas's offer and bringing them into the SEC. He is looking out for the interests of the SEC. I was looking at the NIL issue more from the standpoint of the optics, that it would look good for the Big Ten to take leadership in that area.
Yep, and it just so happens to be leadership that's going to allow us to pay way more than what you guys are paying them down there. It's going to be that optic. That's what it's going to be. And actually, I'd go for the kill shot on the Pac-12. Wouldn't like the idea of USC and UCLA being out there all by themselves, especially when you get into non-football related sports and travel schedules and anything else. I would just essentially develop a full-blown West Coast branch. I'd do that too. So I'd bring Arizona, I'd bring Washington, Oregon, and probably because they're AAU. Well, there's 4 AAU members sitting out there in the Pac-12: Cal, Stanford, Washington, Oregon. I'd bring them in.
Okay, you're going that direction of the country, which makes total sense. Would Washington and Oregon be the 2 priorities?
Yes, of course. But I understand I've got to, if I'm the commissioner of the Big Ten, I'm commissioner of a league where university presidents actually matter and have influence and power. So I throw them a bone. I bring Cal and Stanford in because that's what they want to be. That they don't leave AAU members behind. Cal and Stanford are. They're very good at some other sports, none that necessarily matter right now. But I would trade a little bit of television revenue, because Lord knows I've got enough, to appease my presidents by the clear raise of academic profile the additions of Cal and Stanford would provide. So everybody's happy. All right. The wine and cheese crowd and the up on the hills of all the Big Ten universities, they get what they want. All right. You get what you want. And we're just going to be down here just printing money. All right. New Jack City style. That's what I would do.
Or we could go in this direction. Instead of continuing to tap the West Coast, we could go to Florida and make it a truly national brand and grab Florida State and Miami, which, if you look at the academic rankings, the endowments, they are competitive with the Big Ten. They wouldn't be near the top of the Big Ten.
The problem you run into is with that ACC grant of rights deal. And that's the issue that you run into. Now, if you could make the case that that deal starts weakening, I think around 2025. So close, shortly, before this TV contract would be up again. Okay. So, but I'm okay with that too. Yeah, I'm fine with that too. That's something I think a lot of people don't understand. Like the University of Miami is basically a Sun Belt version of Duke. Very exclusive, high rated, low attended, meaning it has small enrollment, I should say. Small enrollment, highly esteemed private university. I think people don't realize that up here just because we grew up with the U and all the antics and everything else. They didn't realize, how respected of an academic institution Miami is. I do think, though, you got to get the votes of those presidents, Mark, and they're going to be concerned about leaving AAU members like Cal and Stanford behind to be B teams. And so I do think that's a factor. But, from an athletic standpoint, would I rather have the two schools you named? Of course.
Yeah, and that's what we tend to think of. And certainly the people that watch these kind of podcasts are, of course, focused on athletics and football in particular. And the academic portion of this, especially when you're talking about the Big Ten, is a huge, enormous factor and maybe the number one factor. But based on the metrics
keep that in
I've seen,
Mark, the Big Ten has not added since Penn State was brought in from the very beginning. The Big Ten has not expanded to any school that was not in the AAU. The Association of Academic Universities was not a member of that yet. Nebraska's not now, but they were when they were brought in 2014.
Okay. That was going to be my point. Nebraska, and I believe even at that time that Nebraska was a newly formed AAU.
Yeah.
And again, with Florida State of Miami, in addition to the footprint, TV markets, attractive brands, football legacies, all of that sort of thing, I just think that the recruiting base in Florida, again, I'm being protective of and trying to figure out the best ways for the Big Ten to expand from a talent standpoint and to be able to delve into Florida even more so than they do now.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think could be huge.
I totally agree. Yeah.
So, Steve, what I'm taking from you in regards to scheduling going forward is it's about money, it's about brand, it's about pushing the best
that's all
matchups. However, you don't want to break the backs of Ohio State, Michigan, and others en route to college football playoff appearances. So you're going to be reasonable or more tactical.
We don't want to set up a scheduling dynamic, Mark, where we still have the Big Ten East and Big Ten West. It's just not official. Right. We have a tier of schools that are playing an insane schedule. All right. Well, and then maybe the second team into the conference championship didn't have to play a bunch of those teams and went 10-2. We don't want to do that. All right. So, so there has to be some form of compensation. I am sure the television networks, for the amount of money they're spending, have some sort of wink, wink, nod, nod, if not official edict that those five schools, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, USC, and UCLA, are going to play each other in some way, shape, or form, every single year. I'm sure that's going to occur. And that needs to be compensated for in some way.
So if you go by the ACC model that they're implementing starting with this 23 college football season, everybody's got 3 designated rivals. Then you split the entire conference, the other 12 teams, into 2 groups. Even if you don't have the schools that you just mentioned playing every year, you're going to be playing them every other year.
Right.
And you can protect all the rivalries.
Right. What I would do, for example, to make this happen, we would have a scheduling special like the NFL Network has in May for the NFL schedule.
Absolutely.
We would have a scheduling special like now, mid to late January, announcing and because I want to know who's gone pro. I want to look at the early signing period, which I think will probably go away here in a year or two, would be my guess. And if that's the case, then the special moves to mid to late February. Why? Because I want to make sure it does me no good. If I'm going to have a conference championship game where I get to keep all the money and not share it, then if the networks are telling me I've got 5 schools worth more than everybody else, it behooves me to not, I'm not going to play favorites, but I'm not going to hamstring those 5 schools, right? I don't want a scheduling version where Northwestern gets to the Big Ten championship game, not by virtue of playing in a weaker division, but by playing a far weaker schedule than everybody else. If they want to earn their way there, God bless them. Okay, great. But I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait and announce my conference schedule after guys have gone pro and decided to return, after the recruiting classes are signed, after the coaching carousel is done. I'm going to announce it then, so that I can literally hand create a schedule that makes sure I am incentivizing competitive and brand excellence. Because the reality is, the value of this league, if you took Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, USC, and UCLA out of it, is not nearly as valuable as it is with those teams in it. So what's my incentive to not make things equitable for those teams? Why should I punish them because their brands are better and just have a staticky schedule formula? No, I'm not going to do that.
Steve, what I've been saying for years is that the NFL, again, has made a brilliant marketing move. It has basically made the schedule release a national holiday.
Right.
There are, ESPN's going all day with TV shows highlighting the NFL schedule, when either one of you, yourself or myself, we can guess the NFL schedule for any particular team easily. We can easily guess the schedule for any, your beloved Lions. You can sit down without giving it any thought, and 12 of their 13 of their 17 opponents for next year. But the NFL has fooled us into believing that there is actual drama to the schedule release, when it's just a bunch of dates thrown against the opponents.
I don't want it that structured. I'm fine putting teams in pods, and these pods rotate like divisions do. And this pod, I'm fine with that. But I'm going to arrange the date, and then I'm going to leave a few dates open to decide. All right, Northwestern schedule, Illinois schedule, too soft. Okay, so they're playing. They're going to play Wisconsin now, and they weren't going to play them before. Stuff like that. That's what I'm talking about. So I leave a couple of spots open where I can beef schedules up, and then though I'm going to lay it out so that I'm going to backlog the schedule, so that I've got as many teams soaring up the rankings as I possibly can early in the year. I'm going to try to space out a little bit, when those major teams play, so I'm not, blowing up their schedules. That's what I talk about. I'm going to make sure that I am incentivizing competitive and brand excellence.
So for me, if we could ever get all of the conferences on board, then we're making, pick a date, May 1st, the schedule release for college football, and we're making it a national holiday. And there's going to be drama to the non-conference schedule, because it's going to be done by a formula that makes it equitable for everyone. And there's going to be attractive matchups. And we're not going to know, in 2023, that in 2035, Michigan just signed with Oklahoma. Great. They're playing in 12 years. No, I never understood the need for that, when there are much more complicated schedules implemented in Major League Baseball and otherwise, and they're able to do it over the course of an off season.
I don't disagree with that. But then we all have to agree to some form of an RPI, strength of schedule metric, all right, that helps to create, because right now we don't have a playoff in college football. We'll have one in 2024. We have what we've had since 2014 is an invitational. There is no objective metric that you can achieve by which for certain you will be in. All right. So starting in 2024, when we have automatic bids, there is one. So, but for your system, I think then we've got to have an agreed upon strength of schedule metric, so that we're incentivizing teams to go ahead and play those kinds of non-conference games. Right now, we don't have that.
Well, I'm trying to achieve equity, not necessarily the best matchups. I think most people that propose this want to see Alabama and Ohio State and Michigan and Oklahoma play every year. Those types of matchups, which would be phenomenal.
I'm trying to impose reality.
And I'm also trying to impose equity within the non-conference.
Illinois doesn't matter as much as Michigan does. They just don't. And they never will. That's never going to change. Okay. So I don't mind creating an avenue for Illinois to achieve, when they have excellence, but they don't deserve equity. They're a subsidy. They're subsidies of Michigan and Ohio State and USC. They don't deserve equity. So I'm trying to achieve reality.
Okay. Steve Deace, Michigan Podcast. Keep in mind, we will do our best to get together each and every week, typically at Thursday, 5 o'clock Eastern time. We invite your sponsored comments and questions, as well as we can do it for a tight half hour, everyone. So we appreciate you being here on time each and every week. Get on over to Michigan Podcast to check out Steve's work, of course, and the Bigger 10 as well. What are you featuring this week, Steve?
On Bigger 10, we're looking at Kevin Warren's tenure. We're looking at winners and losers from the NFL or early entry deadline. And we're going to play a little game of upgrade or not. Now that we know what Big Ten teams have done at quarterback, the all-important quarterback position in the transfer portal, did they upgrade or not from where they were at quarterback last year? So that's just a little bit of what we have going on Bigger 10. And, of course, on Michigan Podcast, it's now the annual tradition, unlike any other. Jim Harbaugh, he loves me not, which has that plot line has been resolved for another year. You know, we'll tune in, same bat time, same bat channel this time next year and see if we get the same resolution.
Alexander, thank you for the contribution right there. He says Texas A&M is an AAU member. Big Ten needs to take them. I don't know if he's saying that with tongue firmly planted in cheek.
Yeah, I don't know why they leave the SEC, but I mean, I'd love to see them in the Big Ten. I just don't know why they would leave the SEC.
All right, Steve, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you very soon on Michigan Podcast.
You got it, brother. Thank you, as always.